mix was sent in by Oakley. Honestly, this is sounding pretty good so far. Like, it's a little lo-fi, but it sounds good. Like, if that's what you were going for, you did a good job with that. You asked if the subs were overpowering. Honestly, I feel like the low end is almost a little underwhelming. Like, you could probably get a little bit more out of the low end. I wouldn't go crazy with it, because honestly, overall, this sounds pretty solid. But I feel like you definitely could have just a little bit more low end. Honestly, the biggest problem so far is the way the vocals are sitting. I'm not really liking how they're sitting. I feel like they could probably use a little bit more top end. They're probably a little too loud. You probably could have brought them down a little bit so that it just melded a little bit better with everything. You probably put them as loud as you did because they're missing a lot of that top end, so you needed them to cut through more. You needed it to be more intelligible, because right now they're really like mid-range focused. So if it's fighting with everything in the mid-range, you're gonna have to bring it louder for clarity. So I would add a little bit more top end back into the vocal and then bring the volume of the vocal down a little bit. Honestly, man, it sounds pretty good overall. Again, it sounds a little lo-fi. The thing with the subs, I don't have a subwoofer in my system here, so there is a chance that on a system with an actual subwoofer, it might be overpowering. I usually use headphones to check the like real low end here, but as far as what I'm hearing on these monitors, I feel like we're missing a little bit of low end energy. That might be more the low mids than like the sub lows. But like, I feel like it's lacking just a little bit of energy in the low end. So try to find somewhere in the low end, maybe even as high as like 150 hertz, just to like give a little boost in the bass or something. So it just feels a little fuller, a little bit more energetic. But overall, it's a solid sounding track. Just again, I'm not sure how it's going to sound on a system with an actual subwoofer, so just be cautious of that. This mix was sent in by T.O. Soul. Just by looking at the waveform, I can tell that this is way too quiet, so I'm going to bring up the overall volume a little bit.
Nah, me, I weren't made in a manor. I was raised in a gutter. My home was a place rife for nutters, and if you move wrong, come around and it'll touch ya. Always someone getting punched up. That's a shout to my brothers. Ran the estate with a vengeance, but they're both grown and got their own youngers. Yeah, me, I have my role models, but they didn't teach shit about money. And they told me to back myself and don't let no one take shit from me. They told me don't take shit from no one, but if you got problems then phone me. Little did they know that they don't know me.
Now, just to be clear, this is a genre that I don't typically work with, so just take any advice with a grain of salt. But what I am hearing is the instrumental is a little bit muddy. I think it's really because of the reverb that you've added to the piano and the saxophone. It's starting to get a little washy. We're starting to lose some definition in the instruments because of that. It's adding like a lot of muddiness to everything. So I'd probably bring the reverb down a little bit and clean up the low mids in the reverb. Other than that, the vocals feel way too loud in volume compared to everything else. I think this is actually similar to the last track. Like, you have a really mid-range focused vocal. You're missing a lot of the top end in the vocal. So I think you had to raise the volume too much because it wasn't cutting through enough in the top end. So I think you need to bring the volume of the vocals down a little bit, add some top end back into the vocals. Other than that, I think you need to work on the compression of the vocals. This is a pretty fast-paced vocal. So really, you're going to need a compressor with a really fast release, because right now it just feels like the compression is muddying things up because it definitely feels like a slow release. You probably use like some kind of an optical compressor like an LA2A or something on the vocal, because in a lot of cases it's a really great vocal compressor, but with something this fast paced you definitely need something with a faster release, and an opto compressor is just not it.
Cooking up beef like I'm heating the stove, but I don't wanna talk about guys that I ran down, cause I ain't into the talking. But I'll end it on this, couple guys that I beef that are no longer walking. But I ain't proud of my sins, they're lessons that I had to learn. Some bridges that I had to burn, and some tables that I had to turn. Wrong side of the poverty line, I'm fat, back then I was hungry. Skinny little kid from the block chasing a guap just to put food in my tummy. That's a job that should fall to mommy, but mommy weren't there for my teens. Mommy died young, I was raised by gangsters, olders, scumbags, robbers and fiends. I weren't always on top, that's a lie that most rappers.
And honestly, the top end overall is kind of lacking across the entire track. If you're going for more of a lo-fi thing, that's fine, but I feel like especially above like 5 or 6K, you're just missing a whole lot of the top end. That's even more important in the vocal, but it really is for the overall track. So I would maybe boost the top end a little bit in the overall track, then boost the top end more in the vocals, turn the level of the vocal down a bit, mess with the vocal compression. Like I said, you need something with a faster release, and clean up some of that mud that the reverb's causing, and then you'll probably have a pretty solid sounding track. This mix was sent in by John. All right, cool effect in the intro, but it felt a little boring by the end because it was pretty much just the same thing. I would have like halfway through that intro started to bring in some other elements to keep it interesting, keep it building before everything kicks in. All right, the guitar and the bass here feel pretty good. I feel like I could use a little bit more low-end energy out of the bass. It's probably going to be anywhere from like 80 to like 120 hertz. The drums, on the other hand, are a bit of a problem. You've definitely overcompressed the drums. You have way too much reverb on the drums. It's making the cymbals washy. It's kind of making everything muddy. And then you've also cut way too much of the mid-range, especially in the low mids, out of the drums. It feels like you like only have energy below like 150 hertz, and then like above 1K, feels like you're like completely missing all of the mid-range of the drums. And while I do normally cut a fair amount of mid-range in the drums, you still don't want to cut all of it. You want to leave a little bit, especially in the like 200 to 400 hertz range. While that range can get a little muddy in the drums, it also adds a lot of body to the overall sound of the track. All right, the distorted guitar that comes in here does not sound great. You've completely gutted the mid-range on it. Also, you went from this like really wide stereo effect on the clean guitar before this point to like just having the distorted right up the middle. I would have at least double tracked this guitar, pan one hard left, hard right. That would make the track feel a lot bigger, feel like it has a lot more energy. Right now you just have like the one central distorted guitar and the tone itself isn't great. It's hurting the song more than helping because it doesn't sound full at all. First of all, because again, it's only single tracked, it doesn't sound big and wide, but also because you're missing all that mid-range, you're missing all the body of this guitar. And man, biggest problems for me is the drum sound. You have a lot of work to do on the drum sound, and that distorted guitar, definitely at least double track it, and you gotta fix that tone. You've taken way too much out of the mid-range. It just sounds super, super thin and just kind of awful. This mix was sent in by Drew. All right, so the performance in the intro was really, really sloppy. I'm not sure if that was intentional, but personally, I would have gotten that a lot tighter than it was. Also, there was a pretty large jump in volume from that mono intro guitar to the wide stereo guitar when everything starts to kick in. So I would at the very least bring that intro guitar up a little bit so that the change in volume when things kick in isn't that massive. So far though, the guitar tone sounds good, the vocals sound good. I'm not big on the drum sound. I feel like you need probably both more low end and more top end in the drum. We're definitely missing like a lot of that like really top end stuff, like above 8K. We could probably get a little bit more low end and maybe even low mids out of the kick drum to fill things out a little bit more than it is right now.
Quiet all alone, all alone. Now that you're gone, you left your boxes on the floor. Now there are no boxes anymore. All we got are boards across the floor, across.
Honestly, the volume of the drums could probably come up too. They just feel like they're getting buried behind the guitar and the vocals. Maybe even bring the volume of the bass up as well, because I feel like this seems like it's supposed to be a really energetic track, but it doesn't feel that energetic. I think part of that is we're just missing the energy from the movement of the drums and the bass, especially in the low end. And part of that's EQ, but part of that's just the volume. I think if you just bring the drums up, especially, maybe even bring the bass up a little bit, I think that would add a lot to the overall energy of the song. All right, so I think this is gonna be a really easy fix. So I'm gonna show you guys real quick how to fix this, because it'll take like 2 seconds to do it just on the overall master. So literally all we're gonna do is we're gonna add a little bit of low mid energy, and we're gonna add a little bit of top end for the drums.
Come back home, come back home, come back home, come back home. When you were here, you had no time for your old friends, only got time for your new friends. Ain't got no time for your family anymore. Now that you're gone, you are so free to be hungry in the summer. You are so free to be freezing in the winter. You are so free to be all alone, all alone. Come back home, come back home, come back home, come back home.
So all I did is I added in a little bit more low mids because it felt like it was lacking there. That added a lot of energy. I added in some like real low stuff because I feel like the subs were lacking a little bit, and like even around 50 hertz probably could have been bumped up a little bit. And then I used some mid-side EQ to focus on the middle to bring up the top end of just the drums and the vocals, because the guitars already had plenty of top end and the guitars were panned out to the side, so I didn't want to mess with those. So I just wanted to EQ the top end of the middle, and that added a whole lot of top end energy to especially the snare, but also the kick and the vocals.